drones and missiles launched towards Israel's coastal holiday city of Eilat. Israel reported destroying an aerial target over the Red Sea. Israel blamed the Iranian-backed Houthis for a similar attack on Friday. Let's cross over to Alan Fisher, joining us now from the occupied East Jerusalem with the very latest on this. And there will be reaction to this from the Israelis, Alan.
Two attacks in the last 12 hours or so. There was what was described as an unidentified aerial threat early in the hours of Tuesday, which was blown out of the sky essentially by the Israelis. That was over the Red Sea and heading towards Eilat. And then just a few hours later, there was a missile that was intercepted. Now, that missile, they believe, was a land-to-land missile that was fired from Yemen. They say it was Iranian-made. It was taken out of the sky by what is known as the Arrow defense system. That's the first time it's been used in Israel since 2017 when it intercepted a Syrian missile. It is the top level. Everyone's heard of Iron Dome. There's Iron Dome, there's David Sling, and then there is the Arrow defense system. So that's how serious they took this out. And clearly there is concern that this was heading for Eilat. Eilat normally has a population of around 60,000, but many of those in the south near Gaza were moved to Eilat, so it's currently operating with a population of 120. So it's clear that the Israelis would be concerned that there would be this new front opening up, essentially. We already have the fighting in Gaza. We know about Hezbollah attacks in the north, and now from across the Red Sea, we're seeing attacks by the Houthis based in Yemen.
Alan, can we just talk about how the Israelis now are either telling their own public or not about this ground offensive in Gaza? Because this all affects the way that the Prime Minister imparts this information to the public, with so many of him wanting his resignation.
For the moment, they continue to support the war. What we're hearing from the Israeli army is that the fighting in Gaza is deeply intense. It's not just street to street. They have described it as face to face. And they say that this will cause continued concern for the Israelis because clearly it carries, they say, a heavy price. But they say it is important to continue this sort of fighting in the streets, and we know the tanks are there in Gaza as well. What isn't clear and won't be made clear to the public at this stage is what the end game is, and of course that is operational. It's part of the Israeli military planning. The Americans constantly told the Israelis that they had to have a plan for getting in and getting out, but also what they were going to do when they were there. And Benjamin Netanyahu said on a number of occasions, look, we have those plans, we're just not going to share them with the public, which is obvious. But everyone in Israel and nearby is watching this intense fighting. They're watching reports of how heavy the fighting is, how tanks are there. Hamas would claim that the tanks are getting bogged down, that in the face-to-face fighting, Israel is suffering heavy losses. But everyone is following what is going on in Gaza with the limited information they can get from the Israeli news services and also from the information that has been provided by the Israeli military.
Alan Fisher there for us in the occupied East Jerusalem. Thank you.
Israel has bombed the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza for a third day in a row. Nearly 200 Palestinians are now known to have been killed there. Strikes have also targeted the Maghazi camp in central Gaza. In a moment, we'll be live with our correspondent in Gaza, but first, this update from Asad Baig.
The bombs haven't stopped. Neither have the deaths. Gaza's skyline is a constant stream of billowing smoke. On the ground, it's a desperate fight to save lives. Fuel is running low for generators at the Indonesian hospital, now using the backup generator. The injured keep arriving. It's not just about saving lives. It's about caring for the many children who have had life-changing injuries because of the Israeli war on Gaza. 4-year-old Kenzie is burned and bruised. Her arm amputated, too young to understand the war or what has happened to her.
The house collapsed completely on them. They were injured, and they took the girls out from under the rubble. They called me when I was on my way from Nusayrat and told me that my daughter Kinsey was killed. But when I arrived at the hospital, I found that they had given her first aid.
1-year-old Militia needs round-the-clock care.
We talk about 68 killed from my family. She is the only survivor. She is paralyzed. There is shrapnel that hit her spine. The girl cannot move at all. What did she do wrong?
But they are alive. Not everyone has survived Israel's bombardment. The fighting continues, with Israel saying its troops have moved deeper into the Gaza Strip. Hamas, though, says it's resisting the incursions, releasing this video which appears to show its fighters targeting Israeli tanks. One of the world's strongest militaries, with nearly $4 billion additional funding from the United States, waging war on the people in a narrow strip of land. Palestinians have no air force, no air defense, no army, and no major Western power calling for a ceasefire. Asad Beg, Al Jazeera.
Well, the number of Palestinians killed in Gaza in the past 25 days has now risen to more than 9,000. That includes more than 3,700 children, which means a child is being killed every 10 minutes. In the occupied West Bank, Israeli raids have killed 134 Palestinians in the past 3 weeks, and more than 1,900 have been detained. On the Israeli side, more than 1,400 Israelis were killed in Hamas's attack on October the 7th. The Israeli military says 18 soldiers have been killed since the ground offensive began last week. The spokesman of the Health Ministry in Gaza gave this update on those killed, injured, and under the rubble.
We received 2,600 reports for missing, including 1,150 children missing or buried under the debris. The Israeli occupation forces violations against medical facilities resulted in 135 deaths among the medical personnel, 125 ambulance vehicles destroyed, 100 medical facilities were partially damaged, and 16 hospitals and 32 medical cares are now totally out of operation, either by direct targeting or as a result of absence of fuel.
Of the more than 2 million people living in Gaza, 1.7 million of them are refugees. They live in and around 8 camps operated by the UN. Rory Challens has more on that.
They are the children, grandchildren and great-grandchildren of a war 3/4 of a century past. But each new generation frequently meets its own violent aftershocks or echoes of that war. All are descendants of the Nakba, or catastrophe, what Palestinians call the 1948 conflict that led to the creation of Israel. As Palestinians fled or were expelled by Israeli forces to neighbouring countries, thousands found themselves in the Gaza Strip, then controlled by the Egyptian army. First, refugees stayed in mosques, homes, barracks and tents. But with time and population increases, Gaza's 8 UN-run camps developed into dense urban areas. 1948 created the Gaza Strip and its refugee camps. 1967 turned them into what many have called open-air prisons. Israel's victory in the six-day Arab-Israeli war left it in a dominant position, and Gaza, East Jerusalem and the West Bank became occupied territories. It's often Palestinian civilians who suffer the most in Israel's attacks. Israel blames armed Palestinian groups such as Hamas for the violence. Life for Gaza's refugees is an onslaught of formidable challenges: blockades, overcrowding, insufficient water, power and healthcare, poverty, psychological trauma, the failures of a fractured Palestinian Authority, and of course the terrible toll of Israel's bombs and missiles. All in a tiny strip of land now facing its most sustained attack in decades. Rory Challens, Al Jazeera.
Well, let's go to Al Jazeera's Hani Mahmoud. He joins us now from Khan Yunis inside Gaza. So first of all, a third strike, Hani, on Jabalia refugee camp in 3 days, and a strike near a UN-affiliated school. What does the aftermath of all of that look like right now?
Yes, Sammy. Well, let's bring you the latest. Another airstrike within the past few minutes in Al Bureij refugee camp in central Gaza Strip. This is the middle area. And it's a residential home full with evacuees, in addition to the owner of the residential home. Another airstrike in central Khan Yunis as well. And just as we speak, ambulances in Nasser Hospital are given the signal to rush to the side of the targeted residential home. They leave the main gate right now, as there are reports of multiple injuries at the spot. But earlier on this day, within the past 2 hours, a third airstrikes in Jabalia refugee camp in the neighborhood.
I don't remember you.
Was destroyed completely by multiple airstrikes, leaving a large number of killed people, as well as multiple number of injuries, who were rushed right away to the Indonesian hospital, the only remaining functioning health facility, functioning partially, by the way, in the hospital.
And at the same time, Hani, we are hearing Israeli forces are saying their troops are at the gates of Gaza City. What kind of resistance are they facing?
Yes, well, since the beginning of the ground invasion, since the Israelis announced that they started their ground invasion in the past 2 stages, Israeli tanks and Israeli forces are pushing deep in the northern part from 3 main axes, the northern western side and from the northern eastern side of the border city of Beit Hanun, and mainly from the southern part of Gaza City, coming from the southern eastern side in an attempt to squeeze Gaza. There are reports now they are at the gates of Gaza City, and we spoke with someone who just came from Gaza City all the way to the southern part and talk about horror stories going on, as there were intense airstrikes and artillery shelling and naval shelling on his way from Gaza to the city of Khan Yunis. There are fierce battles going on, confrontation between Israeli army and between the militant groups inside Gaza City.
And Hani, as you're talking, we're looking at pictures of what looks like fighting, but also we were seeing pictures of destruction, frankly, and a lot of children left in the rubble. The Indonesian hospital said it's had to shut down its main generator. Those people who survived these attacks, escaped that rubble, what kind of medical services are left for them?
Well, Sammy, the more intense airstrikes are just leaving a large number. There's a tsunami of casualties and only mounting too much pressure on hospitals and other medical facilities. As of this moment, the only remaining health facility functioning in the northern part is the Indonesian hospital. It was already working beyond its capacity on just limited resources in terms of medical supplies and fuel supplies. But as of this morning, the hospital ran completely out of fuel, and it had to shut down its main generator that ran major part of the hospital, and they are running now on subordinate a small power generator just to keep 2 important departments running, the ventilation system as well as the ICU units in the hospitals. But we're going to see more of this tragic going on in the coming hours as they run completely out of the fuel.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much, Hani Mahmoud.
Well, Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant visited frontline areas of Gaza earlier on Wednesday before returning to Tel Aviv to give a statement to the media there, insisting Israel must win the war.
We are progressing according to the plan. Hamas is suffering severe blows. Over 10,000 munitions were dropped on the city of Gaza. Thousands of targets were hit, thousands of targets were destroyed, thousands of terrorists were eliminated. The soldiers described that they encountered everything. Terrorists come out of shafts, underground tunnels, under buildings, under hospitals, under schools. They see everything. Gaza is a face of terrorism and evil.
Meanwhile, the Israeli army has shown what it says is a cache of weapons and supplies seized from fighters involved in the October the 7th attacks. Among the various items were a large amount of rocket launchers, rocket-propelled grenades, handguns, assault rifles and assorted ammunition. Israel says the weaponry was used in attacks on houses inside Israel at the start of the war, as well as against tanks and soldiers inside Gaza. Jordan has announced it will recall its ambassador to Israel. It also says Israel's ambassador cannot return to the country. Let's go to Sarah Khairat, who's in occupied East Jerusalem. Sarah, so we'll get to that diplomatic spat in just a moment. But first, the Israeli army saying their troops are close to Gaza City. What are the latest military developments on the ground, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. In the last half an hour or so, we've also heard of the death of another Israeli soldier, bringing it to a total of 17 since they entered Gaza, with the biggest number of deaths that happened over the last 48 hours, which was a big blow for the Israelis. But they said that this is going to happen as they move deeper in with more urban warfare. The government and the military have confirmed that 10,000 bombs have been dropped on Gaza since the start of the war, which is a little over 2 weeks ago. It's an incredible amount, and they say it's necessary to do that first, airstrikes first, and then move deeper in with those troops. They've also said that, and you just mentioned there, the tunnels. The tunnels is the biggest issue for them. They're saying that their soldiers, and they released some of those videos and pictures earlier, showing the soldiers trying to target Hamas fighters, or Hassan Brigade fighters, coming out of those tunnels. And there's an element of surprise there. But they have to continue this. If they want to win this war, they have to keep up the momentum. And they're saying that those soldiers have the Air Force reinforcement abundant as they move deeper in. Once again, we've heard from the Defense Ministry saying that this is necessary, that they are winning, that every stage of the war so far is going according to plan. And he also added that those decisions are still being made amongst that special war cabinet that was created at the start of the war, where they can make those big decisions, and everything that they're doing so far is according to their plan. And
Sarah, just quickly on the diplomatic front, how have Israeli officials there been responding to Jordan's decision to recall its ambassador?
In a short statement, they called it unfortunate. I think, we'll have to see how that works out for them. Their main focus here, to be honest, is on what's going on in Gaza and their war and eliminating Hamas entirely. But this also comes off the back of tensions this year since this far-right government came into power, where there were plenty of incursions of Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site for Muslims, which is here just not far behind me. You had Itamar Ben-Gvir, he's the National Security Minister, that would provoke Muslims and Palestinians by going to Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. There are certain days where they're not allowed to do that, and a lot of settlers have been doing this throughout the year, completely ignoring those rules and regulations. And Jordan is a custodian to Al-Aqsa. So there's been a lot of tension before, and this just adds to that. But it's also Jordan and other countries like in Latin America, Bolivia, for example, Peru and Colombia, that are sending a stronger message to Israel, saying that they completely are against this war, and they want more humanitarian aid, and they're against the humanitarian catastrophe that's happening now in Gaza, as we see.
Sarah Khairat, live for us there in occupied East Jerusalem. Sarah, thank you.
The Israeli military says its forces are on the outskirts of Gaza City. Tanks and soldiers have crossed into the area at 3 main locations. This marks the deepest incursion into the territory since Israel withdrew from Gaza back in 2005. The Israeli military says 18 soldiers have been killed since the ground offensive began last week. Let's go now to Alan Fisher. He joins us live from occupied East Jerusalem. So what are they saying about the mounting casualties?
We are told that there has been a lot of intense fighting in and around Gaza, that the Israeli forces are finding that they're coming up against anti-tank battalions. They're also coming up against hand grenades being thrown at them and landmines. We know that one of their senior commanders of the armoured brigade has been killed. He was a man that was regarded as a hero in Israel because of how he turned his troops round on the 7th of October and fought back against Hamas. He has now died, and this comes just a couple of days after the Israelis said that the anti-tank organizer, and they said that this would make things easier as they move further into the Gaza Strip. But it's clear that the urban fighting that they expected to encounter, it's there and it's slowing their progress. They might not be moving as fast as many analysts thought they would in the early days of this conflict.
And Alan, we know the US Secretary of State is heading to the region tomorrow. What's it?
Well, he's coming to find out what Israel's new military objectives are. You remember that Antony Blinken was here twice before the ground war actually started. He will again reiterate his support for Israel and the right to defend themselves as long as they do it within international law, both humanitarian law and the rules of war. And he gave evidence on Capitol Hill earlier this week, and we heard him say that there would be no ceasefire, that would be a benefit to Hamas. There is some suggestion that he might call for a humanitarian pause, but certainly given his comments earlier this week, that seems unlikely. Now, during that hearing, he said that perhaps the Palestinian Authority could play an enhanced role in governing Gaza after the war. Well, just in the last 30 minutes or so, Hamas has released a statement saying it is rude and arrogant of the United States to try and suggest such a thing, that they reject blatant attempts to intervene and impose a new regime in Gaza itself. Now, we know that Antony Blinken will meet with senior government figures here. His intention then is to go to Amman in Jordan, where he'll meet King Abdullah there, and then he will go to Turkey and he will speak to the president and senior members of the Turkey government. There's always the possibility, as we saw back in October, that Antony Blinken could add steps on to this visit, but clearly his visit here, his visit to Israel on Friday, is going to be the most significant of all his discussions.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much, Alan Fisher. Well, Alon Liel is a former Director General of the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs and a former Israeli ambassador to South Africa. Joins us now from Tel Aviv. Good to have you with us. So, first of all, do you think Benjamin Netanyahu has made the release of Israeli captives in Gaza a priority?
I think it is up on the agenda, but naturally, with the last days of fighting inside the Gaza Strip, all the focus is on the fighting. But I think the Israeli government has it high on its agenda. The families are acting also independently. They have headquarters in Tel Aviv. Of the 232 families, they are
what the hell is that?
Finish
me. Gonna die.
They try to send up a message outside Israel and to the Israeli government that they think a deal should be done fast, and even using the term all for all. So I'm in almost daily touch with families and trying to help the families as far as we can.
Now, over the last few days, when we've been speaking and interviewing with Hamas officials, they've said they would be willing to release the Israeli captives if Palestinian prisoners could be released, if essential goods could be allowed into Gaza and the bombing could be halted. Do you think that's something of a starting point, at the very least, that Israel could engage with if this government of Benjamin Netanyahu wanted?
First of all, I'm not the Israeli government, as you know, and I don't speak on behalf of the Israeli government.
But in your perspective or your analysis?
And I can give you my feeling and the feelings of some of the families. I think what we should try focus on is
tak kena lagi apa teruknya aku. Tak ditembak semua.
to the daily fighting. It is complicating things, but I think this term all for all should be thoroughly examined, and definitely the families are in favor of it, and the families, as you know, have some clout, and the voice is being heard, and I think if we can disassociate these preparations for an exchange of daily fighting, it might make it easier.
I'm glad you mentioned the families, because as we see an intensification of the airstrikes on Gaza in what Beit Salem, the Israeli rights group, called in its report policy of revenge, what Amnesty International said on October 19th, that the airstrikes were violations of international law. As families see that this not only claims more and more Palestinian civilian lives, but according to Hamas, also the lives of some of the civilian Israeli captives. Is that pressure going to intensify in turn on the Israeli Prime Minister?
Look, again, I'm taking the angle of the families, and only the angle of the families. And the families want their people in captivity released. No definitions now. They are very, very worried if the fighting is inside Gaza, and they guess their people are inside Gaza. You can imagine how parents feel about their children. And I just came from a meeting with them. They want the people in captivity out, and if it will be done in an exchange, the more we push into it all kinds of definitions and all kinds of additional conditions beyond the all for all, it will not happen. Even the all for all itself is complicated, because you don't know who holds who and where and so on. So I think, and this is the feeling I get from the families, that all sides, including the international community, will try to examine an all-for-all exchange. We might make progress. If we push this issue of people in captivity into the overall picture, it will be much more difficult to arrange any release or exchange.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for your thoughts on that.
Thank you.
Enggak kalah kat Gera Zulu. Jalan 6 orang.
A top United Nations human rights official has resigned over the agency's handling of the war in Gaza. In his resignation letter, Craig Mokaiba described Israel's actions as textbook genocide. He spoke to Gabriel Elizondo.
Usually the most difficult part of proving genocide is intent, because there has to be an intention to destroy or in part a particular group. In this case, the intent by Israeli leaders has been so explicitly stated and publicly stated by the Prime Minister, by the President, by senior cabinet minister, by military, that is an easy case to make on the public record. But it's important that we start using the language that the law sets out. Just as, in recent terms, every major international human rights organization, Israeli human rights organization, Palestinian human rights organization, United Nations human rights mechanisms, independent mechanisms, have found that the situation in Israel and Palestine amounts to the crime of apartheid. The UN needs to get used to addressing these particular violations, just as we have in other situations.
When we ask the Secretary General in his office about genocide, he won't use that term. He says, the previous Secretary General said,
oh no,
that is for courts to decide. Do you think that the Secretary General should start using the term genocide when it comes to what we see happening?
Cepat!
That we see war crimes, crimes against humanity, as you have often done. There's no reason to exclude very strong evidence of the possibility of genocide. And I think you're going to be hearing that term more and more in connection with what we're witnessing in Gaza. But institutions, of course, have to go through the necessary steps before they can make that pronouncement. I, as of today, am an independent citizen, not carrying the institution on my shoulders, and I feel quite confident as a human rights lawyer in saying that what I see unfolding in Gaza and beyond is...
Joe Biden has recently said that after this conflict is over, we need to get back to a two-state solution. In your letter, you say the mantra of a two-state solution has become, and I quote, an open joke in the corridors of the United Nations, where we are sitting right now. Is it really an open joke within the corridors of the United Nations?
Explain. It is, and it has been for quite a long time. If you ask somebody in their official capacity about the two-state solution, they will repeat that phrase to you over and over again as the official position of the United Nations. Indeed, it is the official position of the United States. But nobody who follows these circumstances, either from the political side or from the human rights side, believe, one, that a two-state solution is possible anymore. There's nothing left for a Palestinian state that would be sustainable or just or possible in any respect, and everyone knows that. And secondly, that solution never dealt with the problem of the fundamental human rights of Palestinians. So, for example, it would leave them as second-class citizens without full human rights inside the Green Line, inside what is now Israel proper. And so when people are not talking from official talking points, you hear increasingly about a one-state solution. And what that means is beginning to advocate for the principle of equality, of human rights, instead of these old political taglines. That would mean a state in which you have equal rights for Christians, Muslims, and Jews, based upon human rights and based upon the rule of law. It is what we call for in every other circumstance around the world. And the question is, why is the United Nations not calling for that in Israel-Palestine as well?
Well, Jabalia refugee camp is located in northern Gaza City. It's home to more than 100,000 UN-registered refugees in an area that covers just over a kilometer. After the 1948 war, the year Israel was created, thousands of displaced Palestinians took refuge in the area. It's now the 8th largest refugee camp in the territory. Since October the 7th, it's been targeted repeatedly. Israel claims it's a Hamas stronghold. Now, elsewhere in Gaza, a bakery in Gaza City has also come under attack. It happened very near the Shifa hospital. It's Gaza's largest medical facility, and Israel has asked the hospital to be evacuated and has claimed that Hamas's main operations base is under it. Hamas has rejected those allegations. Mohammed Abu Salimi is the director of Al-Shifa Hospital. He says the situation there is chaotic.
The recent massacre on the bakery have left hundreds killed. People are lining up to get their hands on a loaf of bread were shelled, torn to pieces, dozens killed, dozens injured, all innocent civilians lining for a loaf of bread. Yesterday, hundreds killed in Jabalia. Today in Gaza bakery, it is premeditated murder with formed design. Women, children, innocent, unarmed civilians lining up for a loaf of bread, killed indiscriminately. The intensive care unit, the emergency unit are full. Every single bed is full. We are overpacked. We run out of medicine. We run out of medical supplies.
Well, let's speak to our correspondent, Yumna Al-Sayed, who's on the phone from Gaza City. Yumna, what more can you tell us about this attack on this bakery and the situation at Al-Shifa Hospital where the injured were taken?
Well, Folly, this bakery is just away from a Shifa hospital, less than a kilometer away from a Shifa hospital. There is only few bakeries left in Gaza, where most of the bakeries have been either targeted or destroyed because of the targeting nearby them. Now, the dozens of injuries and those killed in that attack were mostly of that neighborhood, a Nasser neighborhood, which is very close to a Shifa neighborhood, Shifa complex, I'm sorry. And all the people that were killed in that attack are those people who were lining up, to be able to buy some bread. Others were civilians from the same area as well. We don't have the exact figures yet because the destruction was massive and many were taken to hospitals. The hospital, which is a Shifa, the largest in Gaza City, has been for weeks now overtaxed with injuries and patients and people sheltering in that hospital. It's very difficult for the doctors to obtain their job there in light of all the lack of medications, the shortage of even medical teams and medical staff in the hospital and around other hospitals in Gaza. And the hospital itself has been saying that in the upcoming hours, it is going to be out of service. It is going to stop functioning. It's going to be stopping. It's not going to be able to operate anymore because of the lack of fuel. It has been calling emergency calls on the international community and countries of the world to instantly allow fuel into the Gaza Strip. We're talking about the largest hospital in Gaza Strip and in Gaza City, and there are thousands of injuries in that hospital, even over the capacity of the hospital. Now, not entering fuel to this hospital means, just like other hospitals, that these injuries are subjected to lose their lives.
Okay, Yumna, thank you for that update. Injuries, as you say, that are coming at a crucial time when Gaza's hospitals are running out of resources and are unable to help these people who've been injured, including the ones in this latest attack on this bakery, the largest bakery in Gaza. Yumna, thank you very much for the update.
Well, it's just gone 1400 GMT. That's for Gaza. Despite international condemnation, Israel is intensifying its attacks on residential areas. In the last hour, a strike has killed 15 people at the Burej refugee camp. The area had already been reduced to rubble. It was attacked while Palestinians were trying to recover their loved ones. Elsewhere, the Rabiul refugee camp was attacked for a third day in a row. The Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza has announced the Indonesian hospital no longer has a fully functioning generator. The secondary one is providing limited power, but ventilation has stopped and the distribution of medical oxygen has also stopped. Meanwhile, in the occupied West Bank, dozens of Israeli settlers have set fire to shops and cars owned by Palestinians. Now, let's speak to Charles Stratford, who's in the Shara in the occupied West Bank, where one of the settler attacks is taking place. So, Charles, have things quietened down now?
Yes, Sammy. I mean, we arrived here, I suppose, about 10 minutes ago, and as we arrived, there was groups of youths behind me. There was a lot of tear gas being fired at them by what we understand is the Israeli military that are just at the end of that road and round the corner. We saw the kids hurling stones and other projectiles towards the military. We also saw certainly evidence of live fire being fired as well above their heads. So the situation certainly has calmed down in the last 10 minutes or so. But just to give you a little bit of context as to what's happened here, it was this morning where we began to see circulating on social media a photograph of an upturned grey vehicle, a grey car, with two people in it, seemingly, who were initially reported as being soldiers who'd been killed, but certainly they were wearing green clothing, suggesting that they were the military. We can't confirm that. It wouldn't be inconceivable if indeed they were settlers. It's being reported in the Israeli Israeli media that one of those people, one of those men, has subsequently died. I suppose it was about an hour, 2 hours after that when we started hearing lines drop about Israeli settlers coming down from above. On that hill there is an Israeli settlement, there is an Israeli military camp close by to it, next door in fact. We heard reports of settlers coming into this town and attacking local properties, burning cars, which we've seen pictures of, attacking homes also. And the situation was beginning to get out of control. We've seen pictures of smoke rising from this town as well. We understand that those fires and that attack property, or the fires from that attack property, have subsequently been extinguished. But there was also very interesting pictures of the Israeli military soldiers actually fighting with settlers, trying to keep the settlers back. Because, of course, the charge normally amongst Palestinians, and this is true because we have seen it with our own eyes on multiple occasions. Any Palestinian will tell you that usually the army basically stay back, and they accuse the army of basically protecting the settlers in attacks like this. Of course, in a situation where we have seen nightly raids, daily raids by the Israeli military right the way across the West Bank, after the beginning of the war, following those Hamas attacks in Israel, it's situations like this that are very worrying indeed. According to the local authorities, at least 32 people were injured here in Rabiul Akhir over the last couple of hours. And the Red Crescent saying that an ambulance tried to come into the town to take some of the injured out and was fired at by, according to local authorities, live fire and tear gas. But as you can see, the situation seems to be more under control now. But yeah, it's situations like this that are an indication of just how tense the situation is right the way across the occupied West Bank.
Charles, when you read UN reports, they talk about increasing attacks by settlers, and talk to us about whether there's the concern about official support for these settler attacks, given statements from some members of the government like Bezalel Smotrich, who in March was quoted as saying, or calling for a Palestinian town, Hawara, needing to be wiped out, and the perception that creates of at least some elements in the government giving their backing to settler attacks.
I think that's right, and I think that those kind of voices have increased and have been given, if you like, for want of a better word, sort of greater legitimacy in the eyes of many Israelis who are sympathetic, potentially, to, not to put too fine a point on it, a degree of revenge following those Hamas attacks on October the 7th. We know that the government is dominated by right-wing parties. It is a deeply right-wing government. So these kind of opinions that are being expressed by these politicians, analysts will tell you, are only making the situation worse here, are giving effectively the green light to some settlers to attack Palestinians in these villages across the occupied West Bank. I mean, over the last couple of weeks, since we've been here, and especially here in the north of the occupied West Bank, it's olive season, it's olive harvest season. Every single day now, we're getting settlers coming down from their settlements, their outposts, and attacking people trying to pick their crops. Now, we see this every year, but it's dead right that, yes, indeed, these attacks are increasing in frequency and increasing in intensity. And, yes, it wouldn't be at all inconceivable for you to say, well, those kind of voices coming from government, coming from politicians with those sort of ideas are in many ways only encouraging these attacks to get even worse. So, yeah, it is a very worrying situation, as I say, because these attacks happen on a daily basis. And that's another thing, just with respect to the military raids. What we've seen in the last couple of days is increasingly Israeli military raids on West Bank towns and villages, actually occurring in daylight hours. We already know that there have been 1,900 plus arrests of Palestinians since October the 7th, 65 arrests at least overnight, 132 Palestinians at least killed, plus 2 in custody. But we're seeing these Israeli military raids now happening during the daytime, which would suggest a greater sense of confidence, a greater sense of purpose, if you like. And so, as you can imagine, there are hundreds of thousands, many more than that, Palestinians living in towns and villages across the West Bank that are living in fear, and especially, as I say, at night. But now, as this indicates, this sort of thing is happening in broad daylight.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much, Charles Stratford, for your reporting. Russia is revoking its ratification of a global nuclear test ban. President Vladimir Putin signed the bill into law on Thursday, abandoning the landmark agreement. The treaty, which was adopted in 1996, banned all nuclear explosions, including tests of nuclear weapons. Well, for more on this now, Al Jazeera's Moscow bureau correspondent Yulia Shapovalova joins us on set. Good to have you here in the studio in Doha for a change. So, Yulia, why is Russia withdrawing from this treaty?
Well, Russia explains that there is a situation now when it needs to act in its national interests and interests of its people. So we're also hearing from chairman of the Russian State Duma, which is Russia's lower house of parliament, Vyacheslav Volodin, as saying that now the country, it was a mirror response to the actions of the United States, which had not ratified this document for 23 years, and the decision was made solely in the interest of Russia and the Russian people. And
you said the interests of the people. What are they being explicit in what interest they feel is being compromised?
Well, they're not explaining that really, but we understand that, as you mentioned, Russia actually signed and immediately ratified the treaty back in 1996. And interesting that countries like the United States, China and Israel, they did sign it back in 1996, but ever since have never ratified it. And countries like North Korea, Pakistan and India, they neither signed it nor ratified it. So basically, we first heard about Russia's desire to do so from President Vladimir Putin at a meeting of Valdai Club, the meeting of the Valdai Discussion Club back in October. So basically, that was the time when he announced that the nuclear test ban treaty may actually take place. So basically, that was quite alarming for many.
And this is not the first incident we had of withdrawals, is it? I was looking back a few years ago. The United States withdrew from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. Is the whole movement that the world was in a few decades ago towards signing agreements to get rid of nuclear weapons, is that all unraveling now?
Well, absolutely. So as we understand, the world depends, well, among other things, the world depends on a number of treaties like the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons Treaty, the Reduction of Strategic Offensive Weapons Treaty, and others. And basically, over the years, we've seen how countries have been abandoning and withdrawing from those treaties, making the world a less safe place. And right now, we see that how, contradictions between world powers and nuclear countries and non-nuclear countries, they're trying to decide regarding nuclear disarmament process. And all those issues are becoming extremely acute. But obviously, it is a very dangerous sign to see how the idea of peace and stability in the world is shrinking.
And on that point, Yulia, what's the bottom line here? What does this mean for the proliferation of nuclear weapons and how safe the world is?
Well, basically, we're starting getting some international reactions on that. But some specialists say that other countries may go ahead and start conducting underground tests and after Russia.
I messed up the first
Having
shot.
said that, we hear from a number of Russian officials saying that despite Russia's decision to cancel the nuclear test ban the country will continue to fulfill its obligations under the treaty, as well as to observe a moratorium on the nuclear test. And according to the Russian Foreign Ministry as well, Russia will only agree to go ahead and conduct nuclear tests only if the US basically takes such a step first, which is also quite worrying.
All right, good to have you on set. Thanks so much, Yulia Shapovalova.
Russia says these missile launches are part of a successful rehearsal for a massive retaliatory nuclear strike. That's how Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu characterized it to President Vladimir Putin in footage aired on Russian state TV. It's a show of force that coincides with Moscow moving quickly to revoke its ratification of a treaty banning nuclear tests. A de-ratification bill unanimously passed Russia's upper house of parliament on Wednesday. Putin will have the final sign-off. Russia has the world's largest nuclear arsenal and currently sees itself in an existential standoff with the West over Ukraine. Moscow says revoking the treaty's ratification will line it up with Washington's stance. The U.S. signed, but has never ratified the same document. If the United States continues to take no steps to fulfill its obligations, then this agreement will remain a sham. Upper House Speaker Valentina Matvienko told lawmakers. While the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty has never formally come into force, it has made nuclear testing taboo. Russia carries out exercises to test its so-called nuclear triad from time to time. The U.S. also carries out regular drills. Arms control experts say a test by either side could spark a new arms race and trigger more tests from other countries. Moscow says it has no plans to start testing unless Washington does it first.
Oh, sila.
Adam Abusala worked on President Biden's 2020 campaign in battleground Michigan.
Yeah, I was working on Arab American engagement, getting people out to vote for Biden.
So committed that his Palestinian American parents put Biden 2020 on his birthday cake that year. But today, as President Biden shows unwavering support for Israel in the wake of Hamas's terror attack, Abusala says he's devastated.
Now I have family in Palestine who's afraid for their lives, and Biden is doing nothing to stop it. I'm hurt for the betrayal that we feel from Biden, but I also feel like a little bit of guilt for what I've done.
Amid a humanitarian crisis and with the civilian death toll in Gaza rising, Muslim and Arab American community leaders warned the president's re-election support in Michigan could be in jeopardy.
They said that we had to save America from Donald Trump, and now we feel that we have to save Palestine from Joe Biden.
More than 300,000 Americans from the Middle East call Michigan home, a state President Biden flipped in 2020 after Donald Trump won in 2016 by just 11,000 votes. And although not all Arab Americans are Muslim, an exit poll from the Council on American-Islamic Relations showed nearly 70% of American Muslims backed Biden.
We're predicting this could be another 2016.
Nata Al-Houthi runs the Michigan chapter of a nonprofit that studies and works to increase the political engagement of American Muslims, called Engage.
145,000 Michigan Muslims went out to vote in 2020. Biden needs the Muslim vote in order to win. And right now, it doesn't look good.
The White House and Biden's campaign says they are aware of the concerns and are working to address them.
We mourn every innocent life lost. We can't ignore the humanity of innocent Palestinians who only want to live in peace and have an opportunity.
But the publisher of the Arab American News, who last year vocally backed Democrats in the midterms, is calling for his community to withdraw its support.
Did you vote for Biden in 2020?
Yes.
Would you support his re-election?
No. I've already made the decision, and we are not going to endorse him in the paper. It's not only disregard to our life, our livelihood. It's more than disrespectful. Disregarding my life. Why we see, the kids, our kids, and our families are being torn apart overseas. We're being threatened here.
In Michigan's majority Arab American city, the Dearborn Democratic Club president says he's concerned these feelings will threaten the party's full control over state government, but insists the sentiment can still shift.
We still have time. The president still have time to turn things around and make good progress toward the two-state solution, stopping the war.
But as the war expands, nothing is guaranteed.
Do you plan to vote for President Biden?
I'm a Democrat, And I support the democratic values, and I will always vote Democrat.
And that includes President Biden?
Like, we will have to wait and see. But that's what I'm voting. I'm voting Democrat.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.
Welcome back. As we've been reporting in recent days, President Biden is navigating some complicated political crosscurrents when it comes to his unwavering support for Israel. And we've got some new reporting now that Muslim American voters in multiple swing states are threatening to vote against the president next year due to his handling of the situation in Gaza. Muslim Americans voted overwhelmingly for Biden in 2020, and in a close election, margins are everything. I'm joined now by one of the reporters behind that piece, NBC News senior politics reporter Alex Seitz-Wald. So, Alex, talk us through this new reporting. How concerned should the Biden campaign be about this potential protest or backlash from Muslim and Arab Americans?
Yeah, Garrett, I think they should be concerned. I mean, obviously we're a year out from the election. Emotions are high. As Joe Biden always says, don't compare him to the almighty, compare him to the other guy. And the other guy, probably Donald Trump, is not out there yet. But we have talked to numerous Muslim and Arab American voters in Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia, Minnesota. These states are all familiar to all of us. And to a person, every single one of them have said they are hearing from multiple voters who are saying that they will not vote for Biden, that they're so upset about the way he's handled the Gaza situation. They feel like he's not been giving as much weight to the lives of Palestinian civilians, and they feel left behind and furious. And so the plan from a lot of Muslim American leaders and groups, these are not just activists, these are elected officials and get out the vote groups. They're saying they will definitely turn out their vote next year, but whether they encourage people to vote for Joe Biden or not remains to be seen. And that could be a huge problem for him in those swing states because these are small portions of the electorate, but margins matter. When Joe Biden is winning some of these states by 10, 12, 14,000 votes, a big defection from Muslim Arab Americans could really cost him a lot.
Well, in the almighty versus the alternative argument, the alternative called for a Muslim ban. I mean, what does this protest look like here? I mean, is it more like folks just staying home or leaving the top line blank, or is it too early to say at this point?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And they just feel like they of course, are aware of that, and they don't want Donald Trump to be president again, but they just also feel like they can't support the current president at the moment. So what this might look like is all those things he laid out. Probably not voting for Donald Trump, but possibly voting third party, voting for a write-in candidate, or just leaving the top of the ticket blank. I've heard that there are even ideas of working up a voter guide, which a lot of groups put out, where they tell you, who they think you should vote for, and just not putting anyone for president. And as a Georgia state representative I spoke to, she's the first Muslim woman elected to the state rep. She said she feels like she's Palestinian American. She said she feels like she has to choose.
Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera. Hari ini merupakan hari ke-27 sejak tercetusnya perang Israel dan juga Palestin, dan sudah tentu soalan yang paling besar yang perlu dijawab pada ketika ini, berapa banyak lagi nyawa harus terkorban, berapa banyak lagi kemusnahan dan juga keganasan yang boleh dijadikan bukti untuk desak Israel untuk mencapai penjajahan kejahatan senjata, dan berapa lama lagi dunia perlu melihat kepada krisis kemanusiaan yang berlaku pada kita ini yang disifatkan antara yang terbesar dalam sejarah peradaban manusia. Anda sedang menonton Dialog 3 Penjuru. Kami masih lagi membawakan perkembangan dan juga menyusuri khususnya apa yang berlaku di sebalik perang Palestin dan juga Israel ini yang dikabarkan, yang direkodkan pada ketika ini, angka korbannya telah melebihi 8,500 orang, khususnya di Gaza, dan hampir separuh daripada angka itu melibatkan wanita dan juga kanak-kanak. Jadi untuk waktu ini kita melihat kepada apa desakan-desakan lain untuk melihat kepada ke arah mencapai kejahatan senjata, dan juga kita melihat bagaimana boleh dilakukan bantuan kemanusiaan dan juga kecemasan dapat dipermudahkan dan akhirnya bagaimana boleh melindungi masa yang terperangkap dalam situasi perang ini. Jadi kita ada 3 orang tetamu pada waktu ini. Saya mulakan dengan saya perkenalkan dahulu Tan Sri Syed Hamid Alba. Tan Sri Syed Hamid adalah merupakan mantan bagi Menteri Luar Malaysia. Kita juga akan bersama dengan Dr. Muslim Imran yang merupakan Asia Coordinator of Global Coalition for Palestine and Al-Quds. Dan seorang lagi kita bersama dengan wakil daripada kolumnis dan juga wartawan kumpulan media Cina CMG, Zhang Hong ataupun namanya Satria. Tapi untuk waktu ini, kalau boleh saya nak mulakan dengan Tan Sri dahulu. Tan Sri, kalau kita melihat kepada waktu ini hampir sebulan tercetusnya perang di antara kedua-dua belah pihak ini, tetapi untuk waktu ini apa perkembangan yang boleh kita saksikan dan boleh kita tafsirkan, apatah lagi di seluruh dunia terus mendesak perlunya ada gencatan senjata. Tan Sri.
Terima kasih Fauzi kerana menjemput saya untuk turut serta dalam perbincangan panel ni tentang isu yang paling hangat dan panas pada masa ini, kerana ia melibatkan 3 perkara yang paling utama sekali dalam sejarah dunia, iaitu soal kemanusiaan, soal keadilan dan soal perlanggaran undang-undang antarabangsa. Ini 3 perkara pokok. Tapi kalau kita nak bincangkan perkara itu, nak memahami apakah cabaran, apakah masalah untuk kita adakan gencatan senjata dan kedamaian di sana, yang paling penting ialah untuk kita melihat daripada konteks sejarah. Kadang kita jangan terpesona atau terbaul dengan Israel cuba mengaitkan seolah peperangan ini ialah peperangan dia dan Hamas. Bukan. Itu bukan peperangan dia dan Hamas. Peperangannya ialah tentang apa yang berlaku pada hari ini ialah soal kezaliman, aggression, oppression, appetite, colonial settlement, semua keseluruhan ni. Jadi untuk mengatasi masalah ni, dan dia pula, masalah dia yang dia jadi bongkak, yang dia jadi cakap besar, dan kalau kita tengok ini gulungan yang ada sekarang ialah extreme right wing, yang memerintah pada Israel ni sekarang, yang tidak mempunyai semangat kemanusiaan, yang tidak mempunyai ihsan, yang tidak ini. Tapi mereka berasa bangga dan berasa puas hati kerana mereka dapat duit banyak daripada Amerika. Mereka dapat banyak senjata daripada Amerika. Jadi Amerika ke negara-negara barat, ini bila kita nak cakap kena gencatan senjata. Sebagai gencatan senjata, negara-negara barat memberi senjata untuk mereka meneruskan segala aktiviti yang mereka lakukan yang bertentangan dengan segala-galanya. Sama ada war crime ke, genocide ke, undang-undang kemanusiaan terbangsa, ethnic cleansing. Jadi saya fikir kalau kita bercakap nak dapatkan gencatan senjata ni, saya fikir negara-negara barat kena memahami suasana geopolitik pada hari ini. Jangan menggunakan tahun 73 ke 1990 ke. Suasana geopolitik di dunia sudah berubah dan juga di Timur Tengah sudah berubah atau Asia Barat sudah berubah. Jadi muka Israel akan rugi besar. Israel. First, dia mula-mula 181 tu adalah sesuatu yang Barat telah mencipta dengan mengadakan sebuah negara mengikut United Nations yang tak patut berlaku. Tapi dah terjadi. 181. Lepas tu dia bagi pula orang yang minoriti yang datang daripada luar dapat duduk dalam negara baru ni yang dah memang ada. Seolah negara kosong. Dia dapat lebih banyak kawasan dan tanah. Jadi dia bermula dengan ketidakadilan dan kezaliman. Jadi saya fikir kalau kita nak bercakap berkenaan ini, kita kena tengok dari historical context. Sometimes orang bercakap berkenaan, dia cuba cari asas. Kita tengok ini, kita punya peperangan kita atau perbezaan kita ni bukan dengan Yahudi, bukan dengan agama. Peperangan kita adalah kepada kumpulan Zionis yang menganggap mereka nak melahirkan dan mencipta sejarah. Semua sejarah-sejarah mereka cuba cipta sudah tak betul. Two-state solution daripada mula Amerika Syarikat tahu takkan tercapai. ini pun Israel tidak pernah hendak. Jadi nak buat apa kita bohong? Dia dulu Israel beruntung kerana mereka dapat mencipta cerita propaganda mereka stop. Tapi sekarang social media sudah ada dan dengan itu kita dapat mengetahui keadaan sebenar dan membuat analisa. Sekarang bukan lagi kerajaan di barat, bukan lagi kerajaan yang menjadi untuk mencari pahala tuju. Rakyat di semua negara bangkit dan bangun, tidak mahu melihat kezaliman, the oppressors, the aggressors, who are the victims. Sekarang orang dah faham. Bukan lagi boleh dibuat melalui pembohongan dan penipuan lagi. Jadi penipuan fakta menjadi susah. Dan saya berharap media sosial ni akan terus memainkan peranan untuk mempamerkan. Kita perlu kepada keamanan. Tapi keamanan dengan bukan dengan kita tidak mengambil tindakan. Ada Perdana Menteri bekas Perdana Menteri Perancis mengatakan yang peliknya berkenaan Israel ni ialah bila Ukraine dan Rusia masuk ke Ukraine, cepat-cepat Barat mengutuk dan mengambil tindakan di United Nations dan membuatkan sanction. Dia kata 70 tahun Israel melanggar undang-undang antarabangsa, melanggar segala United Nations resolution. Tidak ada langsung pun sanction ke apa ke. Jadi bermakna dia mendapat kebebasan kerana dia mengikat dia ingat bahawa dia ada sokongannya. Yang macam kita tengoklah United Nations punya Security Council ke PBB punya usul yang orang menentang nak masukkan pertolongan kemanusiaan, menentang semua negara-negara barat. Apa mereka suka melihat kepada pembunuhan, murder, killing, genocide, crime against humanity, war crime. Jadi nama ke apa pun. Jadi halangannya terlalu berat. Tapi saya berharap dan berdoa semula keamanan dapat ini dan pada kali ini bukan lagi keamanan sementara. Penyelesaian isu Palestin mesti dibuat dari segi jangka panjang, bukan lagi untuk ini. Buat masa ni benar akan masuk bantuan-bantuan ini dan mereka berhentikan illegal occupation, mereka berhentikan blockade, mereka berhentikan segala penjara yang terbesar, yang terbuka, yang terbesar dalam dunia. Jadi banyak usaha yang perlu dibuat, Fauzi. Dalam hal ni saya tengok memang ada bukan perkara yang senang, tapi kalau hendak memang boleh dilakukan dan negara-negara barat kena tidak meneruskan memberikan orang kata green light untuk Israel meneruskan segala kezaliman dan ketidakadilan dan melanggar segala undang-undang antarabangsa. Kita tengok dia punya kenyataan pun terlalu bongkak, sombong dan bertentangan dengan undang-undang antarabangsa.
Saya nak tanyakan soalan tambahan kepada Tan Sri pada apa yang Tan Sri katakan tadi. Barat tidak harus melihat pada apa yang berlaku. Sejarahnya ia tidak bermula pada 7 Oktober lepas. Malah perlu dilihat secara keseluruhan timeline apa yang berlaku khususnya di wilayah yang bergolak itu. Tapi untuk waktu ini, setuju ataupun tidak untuk Tan Sri mengatakan propaganda yang dimainkan oleh rejim Zionis pada ketika ini dengan apa yang berlaku sejak 2-3 minggu lepas ini, dengan melihat kepada reaksi dan juga respon masyarakat dunia, terutamanya bagi dunia-dunia yang majoritinya bukan warganya Islam, menyatakan bantahan kepada Israel dan mereka juga tanpa segala silu untuk mengangkat bendera Palestin, menyokong Palestin dalam perjuangan ini. Sedikit daripada Tan Sri untuk melihat kepada naratif pada ketika ini sudah berubah walaupun propaganda yang cuba dilakukan oleh rejim Israel sejak bertahun-tahun, tetapi kali ini telah pun disedari oleh masyarakat dunia. Sedikit daripada Tan Sri.
Sekarang keadaan sudah berubah. Pada masa lalu, naratifnya dibuat oleh pihak Zionis dan negara-negara barat. Sekarang naratif itu sudah hilang daripada tangan mereka. Naratif itu terletak kepada masyarakat antarabangsa. Dia terletak pada penduduk dalam seluruh negara. Kalau kita tengok kebangkitan yang berlaku, bermakna ini adalah satu kejayaan yang paling besar sekali. Bukan kita nak sesuatu yang tidak seimbang. Yang kita nak ialah supaya dunia tahu keadaan sebenar. kita nak larikan elakkan daripada dihala-tujukan kepada pembohongan ataupun propaganda. Kita nak tengok keadaan sebenar. Kalau betul ada perkara yang dikatakan 7 Oktober tu tak ada kena-mengena dengan itu. Tengok sejarahnya, dan naratif ni alhamdulillah dapat ditulis semula, diceritakan semula untuk menunjukkan 7 Oktober bukan sebabnya terjadinya tercetusnya peperangan pada kali ini. Ia terjadi kerana 75 tahun ethnic cleansing, terjadinya kepada illegal occupation, terjadinya kepada penjara terbuka, terjadinya tanpa demokrasi dan kebebasan yang dinafikan kepada rakyat Palestin. Jadi saya tengok ini adalah sesuatu perkembangan yang baik dan saya harap negara barat akan mengambil perhatian bahawa mereka mesti ada ihsan, mesti ada kemanusiaan. Takkan nak bagi 10 bilion ke, nak bagi senjata ke, bawa senjata. Kita tengok di Britain bagaimana pandangan rakyatnya dan Perdana Menterinya. Kita tengok di Perancis. Begitu juga kita tengok kalau kita lihat di negara-negara Timur Tengah pun. The narrative is made by the masses, the people. Itu yang paling penting sekali bagi kita mencapai keadilan, kemanusiaan dan kepatuhan kepada undang-undang antarabangsa dan cara hidup yang bertamadun.
Okay. Sebelum saya nak pergi ke Zhang Hong, saya nak tanya kembali kepada Dr. Muslim. Sedikit pandangan pada Dr. Muslim melihat pada respon yang diberikan oleh masyarakat antarabangsa kerana naratif seperti yang dikongsikan, naratif sudah pun berubah kerana apa yang berlaku di antara Palestin dan juga Israel bukan hanya berkisar tentang isu keagamaan tetapi melihat nilai kemanusiaan, jenayah, keganasan dilakukan oleh rejim Zionis. Sedikit daripada Muslim melihat kepada sokongan antarabangsa yang diberikan untuk menyokong perjuangan dan juga pembebasan Palestin ini.
I think the international solidarity movement has been scoring real gains and successes over the last few years. We've seen that in 2021, in the May 2021 Israeli attack on Al-Aqsa and then Palestinian military operation. The amount of international solidarity was huge, especially from the masses in Western countries and in the Muslim world. But this is increasing significantly as we speak because to a large extent of the madness of the Israeli government, the amount of destruction, the genocide, the mass killing, the starvation of Gaza, the Israeli restrictions and policy on Gaza, these inhumane acts are actually pushing everybody out of their comfort zone. Many people in the US and Europe are saying enough is enough. The 500,000 or more who protested in London defied any government restrictions of raising the Palestinian flag because to them this Palestinian flag is the symbol of resistance against oppression, against apartheid, against persecution. So there is a rising trend when it comes to the international solidarity movement. However, this growing public support for Palestine has not been translated into concrete government policy in many parts of the Western world. The Israeli lobby is still well entrenched in many Western societies, and Israel is still able to find a way out and to get what it wants. Of course, by all means. This means that we in Palestine and our supporters in the South should not only count on Western sympathies on the possible or potential change of heart in the Western society. That's important, of course, because it will dismantle the Israeli narrative. It will dismantle the Israeli framing of the Palestinians as terrorists, for instance. It helps a lot. It undermines the blind support of the Western governments to Israel. However, we have to also seek support in the South, in the countries of the South, in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, where many countries are actually taking stern action. Look at the responses of Colombia, Chile, Bolivia, as well as South Africa, for instance, they stand out. Look at the responses of Muslim countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, and some Arab countries like Yemen and others. These countries are actually trying to impact the change. Of course, the balance of power makes the Western influence still important in all developments actually in the Middle East, especially the Palestinian issue. However, in the long run, with growing significant support from the countries of the South, and with a split in opinion within the Western societies, where the Palestinian narrative is gaining ground, I think things will be different in the long run. But in the short run, we have a lot of challenges. We have to work harder on spreading the word, on sending out the Palestinian narrative and message to the whole world. Although social media helped a lot, but you still see a lot of restrictions on the Palestinian narrative. So we have to work harder, I believe, in Palestine and in the international solidarity movement.
Dr. Muslim, kalau boleh saya nak tanyakan soalan ini juga, kita melihat kepada statement ataupun kenyataan daripada PM Israel Netanyahu yang mana menyatakan this is a time for a war. Ini masanya untuk berperang, dan bagaimana kenyataan angkuh dan kesombongan ini mengubah dynamics of konflik dan juga bagaimana ia memberi impak dan juga kesan kepada diplomasi pada ketika ini.
Saya rasa Perdana Menteri Israel tidak kisah apa-apa international community cakap pasal dia punya polisi. Kalau kita lihat social media Netanyahu ataupun menteri-menteri kerajaan Israel, mereka dengan bangga menunjuk serangan atas civilian Palestin, atas rumah-rumah dan kawasan-kawasan rakyat Palestin. Jadi we cannot expect him to bother about the international community. Kita harus tekan dan mencari sokongan daripada seluruh dunia, khususnya negara-negara selatan. Kerana Netanyahu is feeling entitled, and negara-negara barat sangat komplisif. Negara-negara barat membantu Netanyahu dalam serangan yang sudah berlaku di Gaza. Jadi saya rasa untuk Netanyahu international pressure is not an issue at all. Dia akan terus bom Gaza dan serang Gaza as much as he feels he should. Dan kita tahu di Israel sendiri Netanyahu ada banyak pressure daripada banyak pihak, kumpulan politik, parti politik dan civil society. Jadi dia desperate untuk kekal di kursi di Perdana Menteri. So he's willing to do anything. That's why saya rasa kita perlu mencari support daripada negara-negara selatan. Contoh, bantuan yang sudah ada daripada Yemen. Walaupun negara Yemen negara yang ada masalah sendiri dan jauh daripada Palestin, tetapi serangan mereka atas rejim Zionis sangat impactful dan sangat bermanfaat untuk perjuangan Palestin. Jadi saya rasa untuk negara-negara Timur Tengah, their role is big. Tanggungjawab mereka sangat besar. Negara-negara selatan yang jauh daripada Timur Tengah ada juga pengaruh peranan dan tanggungjawab, tapi yang lain daripada negara-negara di Timur Tengah.
Zhang Hong, suka untuk saya tanyakan pada ketika ini, apa sebenarnya pendirian China apabila kita bercakap tentang konflik dan juga perang antara Palestin dan juga Israel ini? Mungkin boleh dikongsikan pendirian daripada China dan apa mungkin peranan yang boleh dimainkan China dalam mana kita melihat kepada desakan di peringkat antarabangsa untuk adanya gencatan senjata.
Ya, kalau bagi terima kasih Fauzi. Kalau bagi China, kita sebenarnya selalu berusaha untuk menyeru berbagai pihak melakukan gencatan senjata. Ini merupakan misi yang paling diutamakan pada masa ini. Dan kita tengok sebenarnya kalau dalam Majlis Keselamatan PBB atau Perhimpunan Agung PBB, China sudah berapa kali menolak iaitu ruang resolusi yang dikeluarkan oleh Amerika Syarikat, dan kita selalu menyeru segera melaksanakan gencatan senjata dan menjamin kemanusiaan di Gaza, kawasan Gaza. Dan apa yang bersuara dalam resolusi Perhimpunan Agung PBB baru ini juga sudah memberitahu dunia, iaitu seluruh dunia, hampir seluruh dunia kata sepakat untuk menyeru gencatan senjata. Hanya belasan negara yang menolak kedamaian. Saya rasa ini sudah memberitahu kami kita perlu yakin kepada kuasa dari rakyat dan masyarakat antarabangsa, iaitu kita perlu dengan semua usaha untuk mewujudkan kedamaian. Meskipun sekarang kita mungkin menghadapi situasi yang semakin dahsyat, semakin desak, tapi kalau menghadapi keadaan macam ini, kita perlu lebih berusaha untuk mewujudkan kedamaian. Jadi kita tengok kalau sekarang utusan khas China juga sedang melawat ke berbagai negara-negara di Asia Barat untuk berbincang dengan mereka untuk menggesa dunia ini mencapai sepakat untuk memberi tekanan kepada masih ada segelintir sahaja negara-negara barat yang mereka masih menyebelah kepada Israel untuk menegaskan apa yang dilaksanakan oleh Israel adalah mempertahankan diri. Tapi itu seperti apa yang sudah dikatakan oleh Tan Sri dulu, kita perlu melihat asal usulnya. Ini bukan kali pertama berlakunya konflik antara Palestin dan Israel. Kita kalau berdasarkan apa yang dikatakan sasaran dari Israel, dia mau memusnahkan Hamas dalam tindakan kenegaraan kali ini. Tapi kalau Hamas dimusnahkan, adakah ini sudah menyelesaikan masalah? Adakah keselamatan Israel sudah terjamin? Saya rasa bukan begitu. Kerana yakin piatu yang dalam kemalaman kali ini, kebencian mereka akan meningkat. Jadi selepas itu mereka akan menjadi apa? Mereka akan juga mengambil tindakan untuk mencari balasan dari Israel. Jadi mungkin mereka nanti bukan dipanggil Hamas, tapi mereka akan dengan nama yang itu menjadi ancaman besar kepada keselamatan Israel. Dan kalau bagi Israel, dia sekarang mendapat tantangan besar macam senjata dan juga dana dari Amerika Syarikat. Dia berasa mungkin sekarang dia masih cukup berkuat untuk meneruskan tindakannya. Tapi yang perlu menegaskan itu setiap nyawa itu berharga, termasuk nyawa penduduk di Gaza dan juga nyawa setiap orang. Kalau perang ini diteruskan, mesti ada rakyat dan askar dari kedua pihak akan terus berkorban. Jadi saya rasa untuk mencapai kedamaian konsisten hanya dengan kembali kepada dua negara dan juga pendanaan kepada penduduk di Palestin. Kalau orang dilakukan menjadi perubahan, dan kalau itu wilayah Palestin terjamin, kalau kehidupan pembangunan masyarakat terjamin, mereka boleh hidup. Saya rasa boleh hidup sama harmoni dengan negara-negara lain. Ini bukan kaitan dengan apa yang dikatakan konflik agama atau yang lain sahaja. Di dunia ini ada banyak negara-negara yang agama berbeza menjadi jiran. Bahkan di Malaysia juga, di China juga, kita ada banyak berkauman yang beragama yang berbeza. Tapi kita boleh hidup harmoni. Saya rasa oleh itulah yang paling penting adalah kembali ke plan dua negara, memberi peluang kepada juga rakyat Palestin.
Okey, Zaman kita tanyakan soalan tambahan kepada Zaman. Kita melihat kepada muncul sebagai kuasa baru di peringkat dunia ini, apa mungkin China boleh menjalankan tanggungjawabnya untuk menjadi pengimbang, peranan untuk menjadi kuasa pengimbang bagi lagi perkataan dan bukan hanya melihat kepada seruan atau desakan arah senjata sahaja. Apa mungkin peranan yang boleh dimainkan sebagai mengembangkan kuasa-kuasa besar yang ada pada
Ya, saya rasa dalam masa ini kita tengok kalau Israel dan Amerika Syarikat, Amerika Syarikat menjadi tanggung yang paling besar boleh dikatakan bagi negara. Jadi sokongan dari Amerika dan Israel, sebenarnya sekarang dia menolak semua seruan dari gencatan senjata. Jadi bagaimana kita boleh menunjukkan gencatan senjata? Memang merupakan masalah yang susah untuk cari jawabannya. Tapi saya rasa apa yang dilakukan oleh China macam perdebatan dengan wakil Israel dan Amerika Syarikat pada hari PBB ini bukan tidak benar. Kerana kita tengok baru-baru ini klip video mengenai ucapan wakil China Johnson dalam PBB itu mengenai Israel dan Amerika Syarikat tersebar dengan luas di media sosial macam Twitter dan juga TikTok. Dan dengan itu yang zalim di Gaza dan asal-usul masalah ini diketahui oleh semakin ramai. Kalau dulu ada apa yang dilakukan oleh Tansi, iaitu dunia ini sebenarnya digambarkan dengan jalan cerita yang disediakan oleh Barat, oleh media utama yang terkawal oleh orang Yahudi. Jadi dengan adanya sekarang platform berbagai media sosial termasuk macam TikTok yang tidak terkawal oleh Amerika Syarikat, sekarang ada banyak fakta-fakta atau berita-berita mengenai berbagai pihak tersebar dalam media sosial. Jadi semakin ramai orang sudah menonton fakta ini, mereka akan memberi tekanan kepada kerajaan mereka. Kita tengok kalau di negara barat, France sudah bukan sepakat semuanya sepakat satu suara saja. Kita tengok Perancis kali ini sudah menyokong itu ruang resolusi yang ada. Dan begitu juga kita tengok di Amerika Syarikat banyak suara untuk menyokong Palestin. Bahkan ketika Blinken dia menyampaikan di Kongres, juga ada orang masuk untuk menyatakan bantahan. Ini saya rasa semuanya merupakan perubahan yang positif. Ketika suara bantahan dari mereka rasa kerajaannya juga akan menghadapi tekanan dan terpaksa mengeluarkan perubahan.
Tansi, mungkin pada waktu ini boleh dikongsikan, kita difahamkan akan ada satu lagi musyawarah tergempar yang akan dilakukan oleh pada hadapan. Mungkin pada waktu ini adalah siri kedua, musyawarah tergempar kedua yang dilakukan oleh keselamatan. Mungkin apa yang boleh dijangkakan, mungkin apa yang boleh diharapkan, kerana seolah akan ada satu signal dan juga
gila lah.
Kenapa cukup signifikannya perlunya ada musyawarah tergempar bagi Majlis Keselamatan PBB buat kali kedua ini, Tan Sri?
Fauzi, dia keadaannya terus berubah daripada masa ke semasa, berapa jam berubah, berapa hari dia berubah. Kita tengok sekarang pun dengan pengumuman yang dibuat oleh misalnya Yaman, lepas tu pengumuman yang dibuat oleh Saudi, Saudi memberikan warning, mesti ada gencatan senjata. Saudi tidak lagi mengikut dan dia mahu melihat kalau ni dia ada tak ada gencatan senjata, mereka akan mengambil tindakan. Kita tengok pendirian Iran, kita tengok pendirian Turki, dan kita tengok dah negara-negara dah membangun pun dah mula berani untuk menyuarakan. Dan saya harap Amerika dan sekutu-sekutunya di Barat akan mengambil pandangan apa yang dikehendaki sekarang, immediate, dari segi segera, ialah untuk Israel memberhentikan tindakan ketenteraannya, adakan gencatan senjata dan membenarkan, ini adalah daripada usul bangsa-bangsa bersatu, membenarkan kemasukan bantuan-bantuan kemanusiaan ke Gaza. Jadi saya fikir Israel, Amerika mesti faham bahawa negara-negara macam Saudi, macam Iran, Turki semua adalah negara-negara yang pada satu masa dulu rapat dengan dia. Tapi kita tengok nampaknya Rusia mainkan peranan lebih seimbang, China memainkan peranan. China mula-mula lagi sudah memberitahu bahawa terlalu lama orang-orang Palestin ini dizalimi. Mereka patut ada negara mereka sendiri. dan patut ada rundingan untuk mendamaikan itu. Two state, semua bercakap berkenaan two state lah. Saya tak tahu
memang two state
sama ada dalam keadaan sekarang two state ini dia illegal occupation
entah.
yang dicakap berkenaan Hamas. Dia tak cerita pula berkenaan West Bank. West Bank tu tak ada Hamas. Tapi ada dia dah curi dan ambil 250,000 ekar tanah dan membina kependudukan. Jadi saya fikir kalau mesyuarat yang akan datang ni, dia punya agenda satu aja, untuk gencatan senjata dan bantuan kemanusiaan dibenarkan. Dan Israel mesti dipaksa untuk mengambil tindakan yang sewajarnya. Dia kena responsif kepada kehendak masyarakat antarabangsa, rakyat antarabangsa. Ini bukan lagi sama ada timur atau barat, selatan atau utara. Keseluruhan dunia mahu melihat keadilan dan kemanusiaan dan undang-undang antarabangsa dihormati. Kalau kita mahu perdamaian, undang-undang antarabangsa mesti dihormati. Dan Israel kena dengarlah dia punya keputusan ini. Tapi saya sungguh berharap tidak akan ada Security Council ni. Sebab tu Malaysia kita punya pegangan sentiasa Security Council ni.
Anyone I catch slacking off has to join my morning run tomorrow. Wake ups at 4. Sound good?
Morning. Okay, 4 nanti betul. Kat F4 12.25 tak tidak lagi. Alright. Biar dia beluran. Tunggu kah? Tak tunggu. Tak. Sangat bahaya. Ada orang. Yang sama ni. Don't report me, please. I'm innocent. Also, I say. National Client. Relaunch the client. Tutup ni. The game requires a system restart to play.